Welcome to Construction Cashflow. I'm your host, Stu Davidson, and if you haven't already done so, hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode.
His lawyers had run that for him and they'd brought in a quantum expert. My advice to him would have been, forget about it. You're never going to win that. Because normally I'd sit in the background until we need to turn the heat up further. It's kind of like having somebody in your corner, you know, in a boxing fight. Most subcontractors, a lot of main contractors, don't really have sufficient records in order to back up a delay and disruption claim. Probably none of the subcontractors I started working with would have reviewed the T's and C's. So if you get to the end of the job and there's a claim and there's a condition precedent in the T's and C's and you haven't notified it, then you're goosed.
In this show, we ask our guests to tell us their story, tell us a little bit about their background, how they got to where they are today, how they develop their product, their services, their ideas, and we discuss how that can affect construction cash flow and other areas of construction, and also to give us an idea of how we might make things better and give you a few tips and ideas to take away with you. And listen to the end where you'll find out more about them, more about our guests, about what motivates them, what inspires them, and hopefully that'll inspire you too. And always, don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss another episode. My guest in this episode is an adjudicator, a mediator, conciliator and expert witness. He works widely with specialist contractors in dispute resolution. He has many years of experience in the industry with contractors, civil engineering and quantity surveying. He's somebody you definitely want in your corner in the event of a dispute. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to none other than Sean Bradley. How you doing, Sean? It's great to have you here and to welcome you on to the Construction Cashflow show.
Super, Stu, and thanks for the invite. I appreciate it. I've seen some and listened to some of the podcasts that you've done on LinkedIn, and they're very interesting. Thank you,
and I know the listeners will be really interested in hearing your story. So tell us a little bit about your background, your story, how you got to where you are now.
Well, my primary qualification is civil engineer. So I'm a chartered civil engineer, which a lot of people kind of find surprising, particularly when you're a fellow of the RICS. So quantity surveyor as well. So background is 30 years in construction for contractors, predominantly one contractor. This would have been Farron's Construction in Northern Ireland, who operated all around the UK. So heavy civils, large buildings, schools, hospitals, bridges, water treatment works, that sort of thing. So I progressed from site engineer to commercial director over about 20 years. So commercial director for about 10 years, looking after the civils, building, utilities, housing divisions. We were turning over around 275 million at that time. So around about 4 years ago, I at that part of my role as commercial director would have been involved in disputes or trying to avoid disputes and settling accounts. I got an interest in that, and I always fancied working for myself. So when I turned 50, shortly after, I thought, well, if I don't do it now, I'm never going to do it. So I made the leap, kind of a leap of faith, to start working on the dispute side, which pretty low key, just really word of mouth for some subcontractors. And I had a full-time job at the same time as well in manufacturing, running a steel manufacturing facility, which was different, totally new to me, but it was one of my contacts from previous. So start off with that, into sort of the business side of it, business restructuring, management processes. And I have started to grow then the side hustle, if you like, which was the ADR side of it, and then doing the law degree, adjudicator exams, mediator exams. So it's grown about 2 years ago, which that became full time. So what I do now is kind of cradle to grave stuff, from business estimating through to the ADR adjudication. So mostly a party rep, but if now sort of progressed to the adjudicator, we are sitting in the middle in between the parties, which is interesting as well. Stressful. You want to try to keep your name out of the courts.
Yeah, I've done some expert witness work, and yeah, I found that was quite stressful in terms of keeping with when the courts want information. They want it in 24 hours, and you wait 3 months, and then they want it the next day, and you're working all night to get it sorted out.
Yeah, it's touch wood so far. I've done a couple of expert witness jobs, but haven't thankfully got the court yet. So the only cross exam I had was just on the exams with the RICS, which was painful enough.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. So where is the what do you think the key type of dispute that you see nowadays?
Payment, really. Got my eyes pretty well opened whenever I left my previous employer, as I say, who was a contractor. I would have thought that, well, we were pretty fair and reasonable. So that was the only sort of experience I had of the contractor side, being the contractor for 30 years and treating subcontractors reasonably. But going outside then, and then having experience of dozens of other main contractors, I thought that behavior died in the 80s and 90s, but it's like some of it is scandalous. So it's really payment disputes where the subcontractors don't know, like obviously with the adjudication coming in, a lot of subcontractors still wouldn't understand it and understand that it's actually a very valuable tool for them to use to leverage payment. The reluctance where I'm in Northern Ireland, that's obviously pretty small. So there would be a reluctance for Northern Ireland subcontractors to use that to leverage payments. So they can't, because of the repeat business side of it. In England, working in England, because it's a far bigger pool and more main contractors and a lot more subcontractors, and it's not, they tend not to be as reluctant, but certainly in Northern Ireland, Southern Ireland, they would be reluctant. So they kind of get treated whatever way the main contractors, and it'll come down to individuals, not all of them are that bad, but it'll come down to individuals. The subcontractors just be treated the way the main contractors want to treat them. Like taking discounts, looking for discounts off agreed final account payments to get paid early or to get paid at all or to release retention. It's not good. So a lot of my clients, I had originally thought because I was a main contractor, going out on my own, I'll target main contractor clients to do the legal ADR dispute side claims work for them. But one, that would involve sub-bashing, which I don't like. And two, a lot of the main contractors have their own legal resource, lawyers or in-house people. So vast majority of my clients now are subcontractors or small main contractors. But most of them will be subcontractors, even subcontractors. So as I say, just it's payment. The vast majority is payment and cash flow
What do you think the main cause of the payment issues are at the moment?
Well, the main cause, I think, is probably stems from the main contractor's price. So if the main contractor is kind of getting it tight cash-wise, he's less inclined to pay the supply chain. So if it's a tight job, everything's tight and everybody's getting tight. But and that can actually just, even taking claims or variations out of it, that can just reduce the cash flow. Then it's not going out. That's the biggest issue, because I actually, if I was to rank my clients by trade, probably the top trade would be M&E. And I was thinking, why have I so many M&E clients? It's the same thing, extensions of time, prolongation. But because the M&E on big building projects are the last ones out. So you get to the end of the job. What tends to happen if a building project is late, the main contractor's late. They get to the end, they're up against the deadline, and they try and accelerate the works, which means accelerating the supply chain, which means the biggest subcontractor left at that stage would be the M&E, and it's trying to get them to accelerate and then blaming them for the delay. So, and there was actually an article in one of the construction magazines shortly after I said that to one of my clients, that's probably the reason why I have so many M&E clients, is the last one's out, and they could blame then if the main contractor's in delay. If the main contractor gets damages imposed on him, then he'll just pass them on down.
And I think when a subcontractor, an M&E contractor, is asked to accelerate, their productivity is never the same, is it? I mean, they may have an opportunity contractually to claim for loss and expense, but generally, particularly I've seen it with labour intensive trades, that the more labour is on site, the more the productivity goes down. So the amount that they can claim in expenses is probably not as much as they actually lose in lack of productivity, and it's hard to measure sometimes.
Yes, that's the nail on the head, Stu. That's the big issue. So they tend to forego the delay and disruption element of it to the labour and just focus on the prelims, because the delay and disruption element, and most subcontractors, a lot of main contractors, don't really have sufficient records in order to back up a delay and disruption claim. So that's really where they're losing out badly. Yeah, and that's, you're right. Rather than working on a couple of fronts over a period of 6, 7, 8 months, towards the end of the job, then they're probably working on a dozen fronts with twice the resource. You know, and the production goes way down. Yeah.
What do you think subcontractors could possibly do to protect themselves? Because this is the issue that comes up all the time, isn't it? It's the acceleration, delay and disruption. It could be where a main contractor's logistics on site are not quite right and it's affecting the trade, but it's quite easy for them to blame the trade and ask for more resource. What do you think the subby could do to protect himself, do you think?
It's, well, a couple of key things, but in relation to that, certainly in relation to delays and disruption, it really comes down to records. Ideally, well, there's only God's amount of apps out there. There's one which is very basic, I would say, and I'd recommend to clients. Clients actually, a couple of my clients have been using it. I've never come across it. It's Site Audit Pro, which is just a one-off.
Yes, I've used it. I used it myself. I used to use it quite a bit. It's good. It's a good little app, isn't it?
Yeah, it just takes photos and you can date stamp them and annotate them and put a comment in, and then it'll compile it into a wee PDF report for you. And it's just getting into the habit of doing that. I was one of my M&E clients. I was looking at, this is a probably an 18-month prolongation claim, so probably 7 figures. There's a big healthcare project. He showed me. He says, "Well, we have." I said, "What do you use to take records?" So they had Site Audit Pro. Says, "Well, we have this open space." You come across it?
Open space. Yes,
Yeah,
I have. Yes, yes.
it's like the 360-degree camera.
Yep.
Amazing.
It is. It is actually. I remember you mentioned open space in the thread, and I went and looked it up, and it looks amazing.
Yeah, it's not cheap, but like if this is £1 million claim, £5,000 is a pretty good investment to have the records, and you can compare. Like you can compare one image to on a date to the previous image on the previous time you did the survey, to the previous one to the previous one. So the reason we were doing that is to look and see when the main contractor released the areas, to allow the M&E to get in to carry out the works. So records like that's from Site Audit Pro app, which is £12 one-off payment, to open space, which is 5,000 or 6,000 per year. Just depends on the size of the project, I suppose. But getting the guys into the habits of having some records, ideally programs, which is very, very few subcontractors do programs. A lot of main contractors don't do programs properly. But that's one thing. Obviously, it all stems from, I suppose, the price. If subcontractors, if their price is right, to get the price right, then they're not under as much pressure. And that'll come down to the level of detail goes into the price. And then the next thing then is the T's and C's. Probably none of the subcontractors I started working with would have reviewed the T's and C's. So if you get to the end of the job and there's a claim and there's a condition precedent in the T's and C's and you haven't notified it, then you're goosed.
There's not enough subcontractors go through the T's and C's and raise objections or challenges or amendments. And like you say, some subcontractors don't want to rock the boat, so they'll sign up and then they find that their profit's not protected and they're not making a profit on the job at the end of the day.
And it's all risk.
What do you think the role of bills of quantities play these days? I know that some on design and build, you see main contractors, they prepare bills, not necessarily always to standard convention, and then they pass those to the subcontractor, and then they say they do catch-all clauses like, the subcontractors deemed to have included everything that we haven't measured, sort of thing, and what chance has the subby got? I'm a great advocate for having a bill of quantities done, because it's a great benchmark tool. It's a management tool, very rarely done these days or done well. Who, in your view, should be doing? Do you think we should do bills of quantities? Is there a better way of doing it? And who do you think should really do the bills of quantities?
Yeah, I remember the bills of quantities. Probably one of the last times I really used one in anger would have been probably 25 years ago on a major treatment works. So it would have been IC 5 or 6 for NEC. So the client produced the bill, which was SISM, and you just loved that because it's particularly on a treatment works where there was a lot of pipe work. There was always a lot of things missed from the bill, so it was almost kind of free money. But clients producing bills of quantities, obviously they're taking on the risk. Nowadays, most of the projects that I've been involved in, probably in the last 25 years, 20 years certainly, are all D&B. So the client's not going to produce a bill of quantities, right? So then it's up to the contractor, but certainly in order to price the job internally, the contractor's going to have to produce a bill of quantities. Now, does the contractor, and I've seen some contractors does the contractor issue that bill of quantities to the supply chain for them to price? And caveat saying it's a lump sum, but here's the quants. I would even if you're getting a bill from a client or getting a bill from a main contractor, which, say, in my recent experience is kind of few and far between, certainly at the minute, should always do your own checks anyway. You know, should always produce, main contractors should always produce their own bill of quantities for pricing it properly, and subcontractors really should almost price up from first principles off the drawings and the spec. I suppose that's probably the difference between you and me, Stu, you being a QS and me being an engineer.
Yeah, well, the thing I like about engineers, and interesting, when I used to do a lot of my business, used to do a lot of billing and quantity surveying work. My quantity surveyors were trained up from were civil engineers first. So we did a lot of work so the bills were produced in India, in Hyderabad, and the guys there were predominantly civil engineers. And the reason I liked that was because they knew how a building went together. So they were very, very on the ball when it came to the nuts and bolts. And whereas I found QSs coming out of university in the UK were more tuned into the contractual and procurement side of things, the strategic side of the work, but not necessarily knowing how a building goes together. So I think civil engineers make better QSs.
Well, yeah, well, that's kind of how I get in. So going back to when I started on site engineer on the civils division of the company, the engineers or the project managers looked after the commercial side. So that's how I initially get into it. On the building side, within the same company, on the building divisions, they had quantity surveyors. So the civils, both companies turning over maybe at that stage 50 million each. On the civil side, no quantity surveyors. On the other side, any good amount of quantity surveyors. But so when I took over the commercial side of the company, I kind of recruited a lot of the engineers into the commercial to sort of to do the quantity surveying side of it. And the big benefit is, like as you said, they understand the technical side. So to me, they were actually better than just a pure QS who didn't really understand the technical side of it. And some of the QSs would actually have picked that up themselves in working with the engineers on in the commercial side on a project. Some of them would come to me and actually ask, could they go back to university to do an engineering diploma even? Whereas my response was just get out and site.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the best way, isn't it? To walk around site, to talk to people on site, talk to the site managers, and it's the best way, and come up with and maybe sit with them when there's solutions. I remember quite often sitting with the site manager or a specialist subcontractor foreman around a particular detail that the design team have been kicking around issuing drawings for ages, and nobody could come up with a solution that worked. And then we used to say, well, let's sit down and site, and let's get a bit of paper and a pen and a scribble on a notepad, and let's work out, and then we'll draw a drawing and we'll send that back to the design team and see if they can do anything with it. Yeah, so that was a good way of learning how things went together.
Yeah, no, 100%. I don't understand how you can actually QS a project remotely. And some of my bigger clients, that's what they would do. The QS is not a very little interaction with the site and rarely go to site. For me, it just doesn't work, really.
Yeah. And I think it is in the detail. And I know for a couple of years I've been quite interested in looking to see how micro milestone payments would work in construction to improve cash flow. And I think to get to micro milestones, it's, you know, your project program has to be fairly granular. It's more intense. It's more kind of labor intensive in terms of measurement, and it's always I found that technology is not quite, you know, it's the expense and the cost of doing that has always been a bit prohibitive. But I kind of think that there's some there's some products with technology now, with data, and as you said, the open space, that maybe we could have another look at micro payments, and looking at the, getting to site and looking at the actual what's going on per location, as opposed to doing periodic payments, which are kind of a bit of a catch-all.
Yeah. What do you mean, like macro payments, like, or micro milestones, like sort of week milestones, or?
Yeah. Bring them down to you can manage weekly or even daily, but also pinpoint the area that you're so the payments related to the location within the building. So the building split up into a grid. So the grid, as that particular part of the building gets completed, the payments are linked to the milestone, which will also relates to where it is in the building. Then it can be related back to the drawing, and you can kind of map it as you go along.
You just want to go back to using bills of quantities, Stu, don't you?
Oh, I do. Yeah. Well, okay, you got me. I miss them so much.
Really, micro milestones, we'll break it down into the linear meter and square meter.
Yeah, I want to get my coloured pens out again and measure some joinery, and some skirting. That's what I used to like measuring.
Yeah.
So going back for a moment about regarding the mediation, adjudication, alternative dispute resolution, I noticed with some subcontractors the cost of that is still seen as fairly prohibitive, even in mediation. Can it be? Is it always expensive? Is there a way that they can access? Because they're already, I presume by the time they're getting to adjudication, they're already owed money. So money's going to be tight, their cash flow is going to be tight, and it may be a bit daunting to think, well, I've got to pay, I could end up paying 20, 30, 40,000 pounds for an adjudication. What's your views on that? What have you come across with that being prohibitive at all?
That certainly is a perception. Of an incorrect perception, I would say, but it depends who you go to. A couple of horror stories, but I'll maybe come to them. But like, I have run adjudications for subcontractors for as little as 5,000. I wouldn't run that. I wouldn't run that if I wasn't pretty sure that we're going to win it, because then, so they're not liable for the adjudicator's costs. Then all they're really liable for would be my cost, and if it's only $5,000, it would be pretty small. I'm not going to charge them $6,000 for running the $5,000 adjudication. Put it that way. Some of them actually have run that size. I've come back and says, look, I'll do a no win, no fee on it. If you win, you pay me. If you don't win, don't bother. I've done a couple of those, but the cost of an adjudication, I'm in the middle of 3 at the minute as a party rep, and one's an adjudicator. The party cost could be 10,000 if you don't, for say maybe an adjudication which is maybe over 100,000, 200,000. So you could have your own costs which aren't recoverable of around 10,000. You could have potentially the adjudicator's costs could be between 10,000, 20,000 each for that low size of claim. Usually, worst case, you end up, if you don't win everything, you'll end up paying half of that. So that's as much as you'll be out. But I just finished an adjudication, which was the one I posted a couple of weeks ago, which was a 7-figure award, where each party had a lawyer, quantum expert, a delay expert, and a couple of juniors. So like the legal costs on that were into the hundreds of thousands, because each party's fighting fire with fire. But if it's a like, I'm even running an adjudication at the minute, which isn't over money. It's over I just want a declaration. So I'm running it just for the nomination fee. Do we get the declaration? And then we'll take it on to the quantum, which is a different kettle of fish. But it comes down potentially to the strategy as well, Stu. So
Mm.
you don't have to go in all guns blazing. And some disputes, I would try and ramp the pressure up from negotiation, maybe suggesting mediation, which is cheap. Mediation is a day for the mediator, which could cost between 2,000 and 10,000, depending on what who the mediator is. And then you've got your party cost, but it's only 1 or 2 days. So that the mediation, but you don't get a binding decision from the mediation. Both parties have to be prepared to compromise on the position, so it doesn't work all the time. But it's certainly worth a shot if there's significant enough sums involved. But as I say, rather than just jumping into adjudication straight away, all guns blazing, depending on the nature of the dispute, you could take it in small bites. Maybe win a couple of the smaller ones, and then hopefully the responding party, main contractor, sees sense, and then they'll settle the final account. So that can happen also. But certainly, yeah, if you don't manage the process, the main contractor doesn't manage the process and manage the resource going into it, then you could be out hundreds of thousands.
Yeah. Actually, what you say about strategy, and maybe coming to somebody, so if there's a specialist contractor, subcontractor listening to the podcast, to come to someone like yourself first that can talk to them about strategy. And I hear what you say about maybe winning a few small ones if there's a smaller way you can do it, or starting at a gradual level, which, as you say, develop the strategy, how we're going to go ahead, and then that can match with their budget, with their cash flow, what their risk they're prepared to take. So they're not, as you say, they're not going in all guns blazing, or they're not going to maybe they're not going to a lawyer to begin with. They come to someone like yourself who knows the industry, knows the adjudication process, get some advice, and then at least they can form a strategy that's going to suit their profile.
Spot on. Yeah. Because the first thing I'll do is look at the claim, and if it's a crock of whatever, then I won't be behind the door and saying that, look, you're on a hiding to nothing. You may as well just forget it.
Yeah.
Or there's no point in throwing good money after bad. And so, but some clients don't want to hear that. And some other parties that work in the ADR, dispute resolution or adjudication side of it, don't really care so much about the claim. They'll do whatever the client's telling them to do, even if it is a crock, and they haven't a hope in hell winning. Like, see, I posted a judgment at the weekend because I'd read somebody, lawyers had posted up, we won this judgment in the Court of Appeal for our subcontractor client. Right, and I thought, fair play to you, brilliant, I'll have to read it. But they went to the Court of Appeal, and even the head judge in it, and even he said, like, what is this doing here? You're not going to get any, all you'll get, you're kind of just winning, just scoring points over the other party, because you haven't asked for money out of it, and you're not going to get money out of it. So I'm like, how is that delivering value for your client?
Exactly. Yeah, I saw that post actually. Yeah, it was really, really good, and it highlighted people can get carried away. It's almost like you see in an auction room, people go beyond their bidding limit, and they just keep putting their hand up. They get into this competition, and I can see it. One party scoring against the next, and then you get egos involved, and then before you know it, you're before the courts, and you've spent all this money, and as you say, there's no point in it. What, you shouldn't have got there in the first place.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, and I have lost a couple of clients over it, where you're just telling them, guys, that there's actually no point. You're never going to win that argument. And I had another, it was a subcontractor that I knew, who phoned me and says, will you have a look at an adjudicator's decision for me? And I'm like, it's a bit late asking me to look at the decision of the claim. But he was a bit miffed because he lost it. But whenever you looked at it, it was my advice to him would have been, forget about it. You're never going to win that. was lawyers had run that for him, and they'd brought in a quantum expert.
And it gets back to your values and your integrity, doesn't it? And I love the way that you approach your work, because it's got a lot of integrity to it. You're going to tell a subcontractor whether it's worth taking forward, rather than, I see it quite a lot with not all lawyers, but some lawyers. They'll take the case on and they will never tell you. You say, well, what chance have I got of winning? And they never really tell you. They will always sidestep the question. And like you say, I've seen it where they brought a quantum expert in and they've lost the case at the end of the day, and really they were always going to lose the case.
Some of the ones in the TCC judgments, like that one, okay, was bad enough, that mentioned earlier in the Court of Appeal, but some of the ones that get to the TCC and you're kind of like, so you were never going to win that.
Yeah.
On the Galton horse could see you were never going to win that. Why? But it's people just getting entrenched and taking it personally. And you say egos get involved then, and it just won't back down.
Yeah. And there's always ways. I remember a case I was involved in as an expert witness, and it was a high court case, and it was going to take 5 days in court. And myself and the expert witness for the other side, it was so complex. I mean, we had lever arch files all over the place, and we would have ended up taking a couple of days just going through that, 2 or 3 days going through our bit, let alone all the rest. And the barrister on behalf of my client went to pre-meeting, and they said, look, you and the other expert witness, you're going to confuse the shit out of the judge. You're going to be going back. And he said, look, we've got to narrow all this down to one sheet of A4. And he said, right, what we do is we ended up with about 12 points. And it was, if this happens, it goes to this side. If that happens, it goes to that side. So the judge gets the bit of paper and he goes, okay, he can make a decision. But what that did, it cut the court time down from, I think, 5 days to 1 day.
Yeah.
And it made sense, but always looking at the court time is precious, isn't it? And if you're allowing things to go to court that shouldn't go there, and particularly the Court of Appeal, it's court time, which is valuable, isn't it? And I think there is an ethical reason there to, if you can settle beforehand between the parties and get a remedy, look for remedies rather than trying to penalize each other.
Yeah. Well, no, 100%. Like, as I say, when I talk to my clients, is we're not going to jump straight into adjudication or start to turn the heat up gradually. So the first bit would be then they introduce the likes of myself and try and have a conversation with their party, meet them, go through and try and get something agreed. If that doesn't work, then you maybe suggest mediation. And if that doesn't work, then you maybe send them a draft notice of adjudication. Guys, we haven't issued it formally, but it's actually ready to go. So this is really your last chance. And probably 7 times out of 10, when it gets to that stage or before, it'll settle. 3 times out of 10 on disputes that come to me, that you actually have to start the adjudication. And then you'll only start it on the merits. Like if you didn't, some of them, if it was less than a 50-50 chance, okay, you really just want to negotiate it or mediate it. You don't want to go to adjudication because you're not going to win. So that's kind of all comes into the strategy, Yeah,
it makes sense. So would your starting point with a client be a negotiation stage to begin with? Would you represent on a negotiating basis with a specialist subcontractor?
I would definitely encourage them to talk, even without me. Like if the other party's talking, and just continue talking until that door's shut, because that's the quickest and cheapest way of sorting it out. Can't negotiate themselves, then they introduce me, which might help. Usually does help, probably 40-50% of the time. If I'm introduced, normally I can sit in the background until we need to turn the heat up further.
Subcontractors listening would like that approach because they kind of want to feel their way, don't they? They're already quite nervous about rocking the boat. and to have that little bit of advice maybe in the background, to give them some support to begin with.
Yeah, and give them a steer. Look, it's kind of like having somebody in your corner, in a boxing fight, giving you advice and then whispering in your ear and then sending you out. But they keep the advice that they're giving you. They're giving you the right advice. Just don't go and stand there with your arms down by your side, and take a beating, and then and then come back, sit down, and go back for more. That's the wrong way. Go and say this, and this is your position, and don't go beyond that. Even setting guidelines for their negotiation. It's and not blowing smoke, but the difference sort of between me and maybe a lot of others, certainly lawyers, and that is, my background's construction, being contracting, dealing with subcontractors. I'm an engineer, but also quantity surveyor. But I'm not just coming from the legal point of view. I've settled umpteen disputes in the past from the opposite side of the table. So I kind of know I understand how it works.
Yeah, it makes a big difference as well. And then you can relate and speak the same language, because there's often a language barrier between a lawyer and a subcontractor, and you being in the industry and understanding the industry, understanding the culture, and makes a big difference. Yeah. So how could people kind of get in touch with you? What's the best way for them to do that?
Well, I have a website. Was I put a lot of the posts, the documents, the cases that I put in LinkedIn. So the website is Sean Bradley Consultancy.co.uk, and obviously LinkedIn is where I'm most visible, let's say.
Yeah, we could. Yeah, I mean, I can put the link in there for you on the podcast. So, yeah. So if you're listening, the link will go in below if you want to contact Sean for some, to talk to him if you've got any issues that you need resolving. Yeah, you can contact us on that way.
Yeah. So through the website, there's a contact page as well, so they can email me through the website.
Fantastic. That's great. So, Sean, have you got time for a quick fire round?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll. So first question, a bit of fun. How do you start your day?
Same way I've started it since I stopped traveling, which was it for work. So since I started working on my own, is the gym. So up at 5:30 and to the gym at 6 o'clock for an hour, 7 days a week, really. I have to do that. It's not so much for the fitness, but it clears your head. I'm sure you know it. You look fit.
Are you most productive?
Earlier rather than later. I would say so. Early in the morning, be most productive. Obviously, you're getting up early, then you're tired in the evening. So if you're trying to read a court judgment at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, the eyes close. But trying to obviously I have an office at home here, so if the wife and kids are out and you've no distractions and the phone's away, is just trying to get into, say, particularly if you were doing working on a big claim. It's really, the mobile and emails can be a killer to productivity. His son did a talk for his GCSEs to his class there a couple of weeks ago on that. But yeah, early in the morning and try and get rid of the phone and the emails and just get stuck into something.
What's something new happening in your life right now? Me and my son have just started Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Hey, so fantastic.
Yeah. I thought that before it started.
Good luck with that one, Sean.
It can be quite painful, so it can.
Yeah. So what does adventure look like to you?
Probably just holidays. try and do a couple of city breaks in the year, and then obviously holiday with all the family, daughters, granddaughter now, so and another one on the way, well, another grandchild on the way. So probably just city breaks, seeing different countries, hiking while I'm out there. Get a bit of R&R.
What thing would you love to do that might surprise your friends and family?
I'll probably go back to the jiu-jitsu. So I actually, once I started, I got a bug for it now. We've been doing it for about 6 months, so I want to try and get my blue belt, which will take a bit of work and a bit of time. So that's probably, that's it. That's an aspiration.
What challenge have you overcome that changed your life?
Probably going out my own. So I was in a pretty good position with my previous employer, commercial director. The reasonable opportunities following on from that, but just decided really just to clean break, go and start from scratch effectively. So that was big. That was a big challenge, but quite stressful in the beginning, as I'm sure you can appreciate. But it takes a bit of time, and you keep plugging and working at it, and you kind of get over the peak.
What inspires and motivates you?
I'd say at the minute, I have 2 older daughters. One's married, one's finishing medicine at the minute. I have a 16-year-old son, and he's doing GCSEs, but he is pretty inspiring. He's a lot more focused than I was when I was his age. Like he gets up at 4:30 in the morning to do a workout, and then do his reading. If he's not doing workout, he's reading, doing his homework. He watches what he eats, and then he's in bed come 9:30. The last 18 months, he's read more books than I've read in my life. So he has.
It sounds like he's read top habits of successful people, and he's putting into practice.
I got him. That's one of the first ones he did read. But it was the teenager version.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
No, that's great. I'm sure he's going to be really successful. He's got the discipline.
He is. He's working hard. So yes.
What does success mean to you?
I enjoy, like, kind of what we're talking about is trying to add value, or to prevent or secure subcontractors, specialist contractors getting what they're entitled. So I get a buzz if I get an award in the adjudication, be it £5,000 or £500,000 or £1 million plus. You're getting, a lot of my clients will be small one-man bands, so £10,000 to them is a lot of money. To me, that's a big success, and if I can keep doing that, that's what I want to do.
What advice would you give your young self?
That would be, I kind of probably did. So I kind of like to think my son Shane is like younger. I view him as my younger self, and I kind of give him 2 pieces of advice. One was, at your age, you know next to nothing, right? And 2 would be quote from Marcus Aurelius, which is, it's inspired a book by Ryan Holiday, The Obstacle is the Way, but the quote is, the impediment to action, maybe know it, impediment to action advances, action what stands in the way becomes the way. So the obstacle is the way. So he's read that book as well by Ryan Holiday. I think those 2 pieces of advice would be pretty good.
On those 2 amazing pieces of advice, thank you so much, Sean. It's been a pleasure. An amazing interview. I really enjoyed it.
Great. Thank you, Stu. I enjoyed it too.
You've been listening to Construction Cashflow. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already done so you never miss an episode. And remember, the faster cash flows, the faster wealth grows.